resting comfortably on Monday as he continues to be hospitalized for a complex lung infection. And U.S. Black History Month celebrations include a White House reception with President Donald Trump and a parade in Los Angeles. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. As U.S. President Donald Trump reiterates the need to end the war in Ukraine, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says he will be willing to step down to achieve peace. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
Monday marks the third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the stakes to bring the conflict to an end are high, U.S. President Donald Trump stressed once more when addressing the Conservative Political Action Conference on Saturday.
But it's got to end. It's a horrible, horrible thing to watch. I'm dealing with President Zelenskyy. I'm dealing with President Putin.
Trump also referenced a deal in the works that would grant the U.S. rights to access Ukrainian natural resources in return for the military aid America has given to Kyiv to fight the war.
I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up. So we're asking for rare earth and oil, anything we can get.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy should work with the Trump administration, especially with respect to economic cooperation, said Republican Representative Mike Lawler when interviewed Sunday on ABC's This Week show.
The United States has invested hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine. And when this war is finally over, Ukraine is going to need significant investment to rebuild.
During a forum in Kyiv on Sunday, President Zelenskyy expressed readiness to continue the dialogue with the U.S. as a partner and hinted he'd be willing to step aside for the sake of peace.
If to achieve peace you really need me to give up my post, I'm ready. I can trade it for NATO if there are such conditions.
Democratic Senator Jack Reed told ABC the U.S. should work closely with both the Russian and the Ukrainian leadership in the peace negotiations, but he anticipates some challenges ahead.
And my sense is that the recriminations by the Russians against Ukrainians after this settlement, if it happens, will be dire indeed, that they will deliberately hunt down and destroy anyone they think was an opponent of them.
Meanwhile, in Russia, President Vladimir Putin participated in ceremonies marking Defender of the Fatherland Day Sunday. He also handed out medals to soldiers fighting in Ukraine and pledged to keep supporting his troops with new and modern weapons and equipment. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, VOA News.
Uncertainty looms over U.S.-Ukraine relations as Ukraine enters the fourth year of war with Russia. Recent shifts in Washington's rhetoric have raised fears that Ukraine could be pressured into an unfavorable peace deal or be left to confront Russia without U.S. support. Myroslava Gangaze reports from Warsaw, Poland, with reporting from Anna Chernikova in Kyiv.
The Razum Medical Center in Kyiv was opened in February 2024 by war veteran Petro Krasitsky and his family doctor. After serving in the army in 2015 and again following Russia's invasion, Krasitsky envisioned the clinic during his recovery from 2 strokes and multiple concussions. With Ukraine's veteran population expected to reach 4 to 5 million, he says he sees the center as an investment in the country's future.
If we didn't believe in the future of our country, we wouldn't have started any of this. There will be no medical center. We would have simply gone abroad, and that would have been the end of it.
Many in Ukraine share Krasitsky's optimism, but recent shift in U.S. policy and rhetoric have many worried about the country's future as it enters a 4th year of war with Russia. Ukrainians fear that wavering U.S. commitment could undermine efforts to hold back the Russian invaders and weaken Ukraine's position at any future negotiations. Maria Mezintseva, a lawmaker from President Volodymyr Zelensky's ruling party, told VOA that the pressure is high and that some messages about Ukraine are disappointing.
We still expect just peace, fair negotiations, and nothing to be decided about Ukraine without Ukraine. We are expecting tough times, but I already see this unity, which we started probably to lose a little bit, coming back. And maybe these shakeups are needed for the purpose.
Gallup's latest survey shows 52% of Ukrainians support peace talks. Alexei Melnik from the Razumkov Center, a Ukrainian public policy think tank, notes that he sees growing sense of realism in Ukrainian society about the prospect for peace.
There is a general understanding that the possible ceasefire, is not the end of the war. The prevailing opinion is that if Americans and Russians achieve some kind of agreement about a ceasefire, it will be just another kind of interwar period.
Civilian casualties in Ukraine increased by 16% in the third year of the war, with over 1,600 deaths, as airstrikes targeting civilians tripled, according to US-based conflict tracker ACLED. On the streets of Kyiv, many hope peace talks will bring an end to the hostilities, but are not happy with the idea of making concessions to Russia and President Vladimir Putin.
До процесу початку перемовин ставлюсь позитивно, але дуже важко.
I am positive about the process of starting negotiations, but it is very difficult to talk about it on the terms we're hearing. The most important thing Ukraine needs right now is confidence that there is support, both within the country and from foreign allies.
Є підтримка, як і всередині країни, так і зовнішніх союзників.
Negotiations should be on our terms. Given the compromises being suggested, I believe it would be a loss, and that is not what we've been fighting for over the past 3 years.
After 3 years of resisting Russian aggression, Ukraine is enduring one of its most challenging periods as its forces slowly lose ground in the east. Few, if any, Ukrainians want to see the country give up land and hope the US can be convinced to stay on their side, giving them a chance to keep their country whole. With Anna Chernyakova in Kyiv, Miroslava Gongadze, VOA News, Warsaw.
The Vatican says Pope Francis is resting on Monday after a quiet night as he continues to be hospitalized for a complex lung infection. Late Sunday, doctors at Rome Hospital reported that blood tests showed early kidney failure that was nevertheless under control. They say the pontiff remained in critical condition, but that he didn't experience any further respiratory crisis since Saturday. Doctors say the 88-year-old Pope's condition is touch and go given his age, fragility, and pre-existing lung disease. His condition has revived speculation about what might happen if he becomes unconscious or otherwise incapacitated and whether he might resign. There's a wake-up call in Africa to invest in homegrown solutions that include tapping into the continent's vast mineral wealth and collaboration among African countries. This follows U.S. President Donald Trump's America First approach and how it impacts the continent. Malawi is spearheading what is being called Africa First, focusing on reducing reliance on external support. For more on the Africa First approach, I'm joined live from Nairobi, Kenya by Ronald Osumba, Africa Senior Political Advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Ronald, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me, Esther.
It looks like there's a wake-up call for numerous countries that traditionally relied on the United States for financial assistance. After U.S. presidents stand on America First, what's in the works for Africa to be self-reliant?
Yeah, thank you, Esther. I think the first thing to say is that aid obviously has been critical in Africa's development. It has helped in healthcare, in building schools, and many other things that have had a direct impact on Africans' lives. But let's be clear, the shift from aid to trade isn't really new. African leaders have been asking for a shift towards more trade with our Western partners. And therefore, this is really not a wake-up call. The real question is whether the world is ready to engage Africa on equal terms. We are sitting on some of the most critical resources for the global green and digital revolution. You've mentioned, there's a lot of critical minerals on Africa's soil. And these are not just commodities. This is leverage. Africa, a few years ago, established the largest free trade area, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is a game changer. And the goal is now really to build industries around these resources that add local value, that will shift raw materials from exports to high value products. And you've mentioned Malawi. Malawi has, taken a strategic decision to make mining a key pillar of its economic strategy. And they've shifted policy to
Ronnie, but the question is, Ronnie, is there goodwill in the first place among African leaders to put their differences aside and say, this is what we have in this country, this is the other mineral we have in this country, or whatever kind of resources they have, that they can put together to put the continent forward without relying on foreign and Western aid for that matter?
I think it's really not just about goodwill here. It's really about pushing it to cross the finish line. The politics in Africa is dynamic and complex, but the economics are straightforward. If we don't come together to collaborate, to create these value chains, to add value to the critical minerals and other resources that Africa has, then we will fail together. That's where AFCFTA comes in. It's no longer just about, shaking hands at summits, goodwill. We really need to push it down. We need to adjust tariff structures. We need to streamline custom regulations and align policies so that goods can be able to move across the continent. This is where leadership is required now. Bold, pragmatic, forward-looking.
Let's look at the young people in Africa, because right now I think a number of presidents are really past some age there. So we have the digital age kids here who know so much stuff that relates to today's, day-to-day activities. So how are they tapping into what these young people can do? Because they understand what's happening right now and they're looking into the future with more advancing, technology that makes things much better for the continent than has been in the past.
Esther, they're not just looking at the future, they're looking at now. They are actually creating waves with innovation, across the Silicon Savannah. If you look at Rwanda, Nigeria, South Africa, even Kenya, with this youthful population is really pushing to get their place. They understand the AI and automation languages. They are clear about what sustainability-focused industries look like. Coding is the new literacy amongst these people. So I think for African governments, what needs to be done is to invest in STEM so that we are ensuring that they have the right knowledge. We are closing the gap between the skills that we're imparting on these young people and what the industry needs. And we are creating that platform for them to move from just having a degree or having skills to being, productive and participative in African economies.
I guess there's some good in the Gen Zs. Ronald, thank you very much.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much for your insight. Ronald Osumba is an African senior political advisor at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order directing the Justice Department to post the prosecutions of Americans accused of bribing foreign officials to enhance economic competitiveness. The order calls for revised enforcement guidelines for the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977 and instructs Attorney General Pam Bondi to halt enforcement until new guidance is issued. To learn more about executive orders and the enforcement pause, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke with Chinwe Esimai, President and CEO of Scepter 3 Global Advisors.
Executive orders are a very powerful tool in presidential authority. And so it is, as we think about the three different branches of government, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, for the executive branch, executive orders are very important because it enables the president to carry out key aspects of running the federal government. A lot of times without the delay of congressional passing of laws or the negotiations that typically go into that. So it allows the president to carry out policy actions. Historically, it's been used by every single president, especially in the modern era. It's been quite common. One can understand a criticism where folks may be concerned that it expands presidential authority, but there's no question that it is a critical tool for the president.
Legally, he's allowed to do that. There's no question about that.
Absolutely,
it's within his authority to do that.
Absolutely, there's no question. And I would also say people are within their authority to criticize, but that's part of what makes the democratic system work efficiently, is having all of that. But there's no question that the president does have authority to do what he's doing.
Executive orders that he has signed this far, it's called the U.S. Foreign Corruption Practices Act. What are your thoughts about that?
So the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, also known as the FCPA, which was, it's been in force since 1977, is essentially an anti-bribery statute. And it has two key provisions. The first one is the anti-bribery provision, and then the second set of provisions are the accounting provisions. So the anti-bribery piece prohibits the corrupt payments, offer or payment of anything of value in exchange for business. And that piece actually impacts not just U.S. companies and persons, but also companies listed on the U.S. stock exchange and also companies that may be doing business in the U.S. So it has broad extraterritorial reach as well. The second side of it is the accounting provisions, which require companies to make and maintain accurate books and records. So it's the accounting provisions and the anti-bribery provisions.
Well, I've talked to people who work in anti-corruption offices, these agencies that have been set up by most African countries. They argue that if this was to stop, it's going to encourage a lot of people in some of these government offices to engage in corrupt practices. This has been one of the guardrails stopping people from, getting all sorts of benefits using their offices.
I think that's a really fair point. There have been some concerns around moral hazard, but I do think that for businesses, you again don't want to find yourself on the wrong side of the law. You may, I think there will be some who will engage in improper practices, but the president noted was his concerns around potential lack of competitiveness for American companies, so the fact that American companies may not be able to compete at an equal footing. That said, he did not reach a conclusion and say the statute should be repealed. He advised the Attorney General to issue guidance. So my biggest recommendation has been wait and see. Wait and see what guidance the Attorney General comes out with. Don't go through a massive reversal of policies or practices for 180 days, and then 180 days later, you're in a position where you have to now resurrect those policies and practices. And so I do think it's a time of wait and see.
That was Chinwe Esmai, President and CEO of Scepter 3 Global Advisors. She spoke to VOA's Paul Ndiho. February is Black History Month in the United States. Among the nationwide celebrations were a White House reception with President Donald Trump and a parade in Los Angeles. Ginia Dulon has our story.
In Los Angeles, California, Brent Burton marches in the annual Kingdom Day Parade, a Black History Month event celebrating civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Burton was a Los Angeles County firefighter for 37 years and is a historian of black firefighting.
From the days of Sam Haskins in 1892 being the first, to the days of George Bright in 1902 when segregation started, to a segregated fire department where blacks only work at 2 fire stations, to now having seen 4 black fire chiefs at LA City Fire, one black fire chief in LA County Fire as the head of the department. There's been significant progress made, and we want to make sure those doors stay open.
Kisha Garcia came to the parade with her family. She says she's encouraged by black culture playing a more visible role in broader U.S. culture.
I didn't see that growing up. So being young, I didn't know that we could be anything we wanted to be. But now that our children can see equality and inclusion, then they can understand that they could be anything that they want to be too.
This year's Black History Month follows an executive order from U.S. President Donald Trump ending federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs intended to offset workplace discrimination based on race, gender, and sexual orientation. The Trump administration says that those programs were discriminatory and deeply demeaning. Other critics of DEI say that everyone should be given the same opportunities. At the White House reception for Black History Month, Trump said support from black voters is one of the big reasons he was re-elected last year.
Today we pay tribute to the generations of black legends, champions, warriors, and patriots who helped drive our country forward to greatness.
Trump said Black History Month is a special time.
We love you all. We're going to work with you. We're going to make America greater than ever before. We're going to do it together.
In Los Angeles, parade marcher Anita Biggs said Black History Month is larger than politics.
We're not accepting anyone else's opinion of us. We know who we are. We know our history is deep. We know we can celebrate it all year if we want to. And we are happy to have the month of February where we do highlight our history.
Black History Month has been celebrated by every U.S. president since 1976. Jenya Dulo, VOA News, Los Angeles.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll tell you about Nigeria's subsistence farming initiative. Stay with us. You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington, D.C. In other news, a Kenyan police officer was killed on Sunday in Haiti, north of the capital, Port-au-Prince, during a confrontation with gang members. The Kenyan officer was wounded and airlifted to a hospital where he died. The mission's authorities say it is the first casualty since the Kenyan-led security mission arrived in the Caribbean country in June 2024. More than 7,000 people have died this year as the M23 rebels have captured unprecedented amounts of territory in mineral-rich eastern Congo, according to Judith Suminwa, the Democratic Republic of Congo's prime minister. M23 have seized control of provincial capitals of Goma and Bukavu, and it's the most potent of about 100 armed groups vying for a foothold in Congo's east. Sudanese military officials say they have broken a more than a year-long siege on the crucial city of Obeid, restoring access to a strategic area in the south-central region and strengthening crucial supply routes in its nearly 2 years of war against the notorious Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group. The Nigerian government says it wants to raise its profile as a hub for agricultural exports in 2025 through what it's calling the Earn from the Soil initiative. Emeka Gibson has this report from Abuja, narrated by Anthony Labruto.
Moses Diogo, a 59-year-old retired civil servant, has been farming for nearly 30 years. On his 10-hectare farm, he grows rice, beans, and peanuts. He hopes to expand production under the Earn from the Soil initiative. Diogo says with an equivalent of $2,000, he believes he could significantly increase his production.
If I'm able to get 3 million naira, it will help me more. Because last year I planted about 2 hectares of groundnut. But this time around, I said by the grace of God, at least between 4 or 5.
Funded by the Central Bank of Nigeria, the initiative has allocated over $32 million for low-interest loans to smallholder farmers, tax incentives, and plans to create more export zones for global market access. It is focusing on expanding subsistence farming into larger-scale agricultural operations focused on high-value crops like cocoa, sesame, cashew nuts, and ginger for export. Diogo says while this is a good initiative for farmers, he's yet to access government grants or credit support.
I have tried in such a way that at least the procedure, how to get this support. But I tried. All of these proved abortive. But at times when this thing comes, it is difficult for some of us to meet up with the procedure, to know a person, to this and that. Even though it comes, there are some selected ones that normally would not help.
Agriculture contributed about 22.6% to Nigeria's overall GDP and made up about 5.4% of its total exports in the second quarter of 2024, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Abuja-based agribusiness consultant Bridget Okpokoro says there's room for growth, but infrastructure issues need to be addressed.
So we need to increase our capacity of production. We are not able to do that yet because the smallholder farmers are not empowered enough to be able to take on this challenge. Another reason why we cannot export is that I don't think we're meeting the standards of exporting outside the country.
Okpokoro says targeted policies and training to empower smallholder farmers and align with Nigeria's export goals.
If government can come in or other stakeholders can come in and create policies, for example, tax reduction, tax incentives, policies that will make it easy for the farmers who are ready to export.
For Nigeria to meet its 2025 goal of becoming a leading agricultural exporter, experts say it must turn ambition into action by educating and equipping smallholder farmers with modern tools and supportive policies. For Gibson Emeka in Abuja, Nigeria, Anthony Labruto, VOA News.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.